Hi, welcome to Dice Per Second. Finally, we managed to record another podcast. So it's the third episode now. With me are Engin, hi,
Hi. Hi,
and
everyone.
Johannes, hi.
Hello.
And at least our charming host and head of a Dice Per Second, Patrick.
Hi. So, okay, it's been some weeks since we had our last podcast recording, but still, we got a lot of comments, and maybe we could read some of them or talk about some of them. One big topic actually was the flamethrower, and we got a lot of response about the flamethrower. So, for example, from Eric M and the user Blue Echo 4 and Scython Nilo, if I pronounce it correctly. He talks about gravity guns. He thinks it's unusable point things. Okay,
So it's kind of your opinion.
yeah, it's kind of my opinion. Yeah.
So
He is talking about like um, when you talk about weapons and special rules and special kinds of weapons, you also have to think about which faction is using it. And he's talking about Battle Brothers, which are more like more expensive because of defense, because of quality, and they make good use of multi-purpose weapons. So, and if multi-purpose weapons now become very, very specialized, it's less of a use. And in comparison, he talks about if you have cheap armies, cheap units, some special rules become more effective points wise. For example, rending on cheap models is more useful than on models where you pay a tax for, like for high defense, high quality, and everything. So this is one opinion there, and yeah,
I must agree. So it's definitely something to think about. So when me playing Human Defense Force, it's even though I'm limited by the number of units, I think it's for me easier to bring in different units cheap with different specialized weapons than, as you said, for more expensive armies. Yeah, makes sense.
yeah. And with the other weapons, it seems like there will be some changes coming soon. Like Eric M is pointing out that he heard in the OPR Discord, they are planning to make Flamethrower a Blast 3 weapon that is always hitting on 2+. Which is something, I mean, it's closer to the real Flamer.
So you mean from the other gaming system?
I mean, yeah, from a
Yeah,
realistic view on it,
exactly.
that you always
Yeah,
hit and that you hit an area. So yeah,
yeah. I think I like it. It's tough, to be honest, of course. And I'm curious how expensive they will be. So I don't have the details, but from the comments. So thank you for these. I think it sounds promising, but could be expensive, of course.
yeah. Let's wait for the final changes so we can comment on them. One thing to point out: Rafal RK just wrote that in version 3.0, Poison will force you to reroll sixes on defense rolls. And he says it makes sense because goblins or conscripts will be more affected than tanks or battle brothers because of different defense. But yeah, we can wait for
sense.
the final change when it's official.
So
It's baffling me because they always wanted to avoid re-rolling stuff because re-rolling takes time and a lot of OPR's system is about time not very time consuming. It needs to be short, and if you re-roll a lot of stuff, it makes it longer. I think they avoided this specific reason for that.
Yeah, it's a question if you can have a
I
full
don't have a
army
problem
with
with that.
only poison weapons, so it will be a lot of rerolls. But if it's just two weapons,
That's true, but I think there are some armies who can really take a lot of poison weapons. I think.
yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think they will review that, of course. But to me, for the understanding how poison is working, so if you roll a 6, the defender has to re-roll its saves, or has the defender to re-roll his sixes
Yes.
on his defense roll.
So I don't know about this rule. I
Yeah.
didn't read about it, but he says it will force you to re-roll sixes on defense rolls.
Okay.
Sixes on defense rolls. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it won't happen a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
true.
yeah, if you have a low defense because you're just
Okay,
a
then it
goblin or
won't
a
happen.
conscript, then it's even more unlikely that you can save the wound.
Yes,
True,
true.
but it was also on the old rule. So let's wait for the final review. I'm not convinced so far on that one, but let's see how it will be.
Yeah.
Seems pretty weak to me, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is. Okay, so let's move on to today's topic. What do we have for today?
So my idea for today was a very general comment, which will be applicable, I think, throughout the versions of the game. So, action management. How do you think? How do you use the action rule? By how does it influence your army building specifically? Maybe let's start in the beginning. Do you prefer a lot of action or less? What does it influence your army building? And then later on into the game, yeah, how do you manage your actions? How do you pick your targets and so on? But what do you think? Let's start in the beginning. Do you prefer? Well, how do you build your armies? Do you think about the actions you use, or do you look more specifically into the units?
Well, at least I try to avoid having not much activations. A lot of people, I think, are saying more activations is generally more better, and the more activations, the better the army. Like 10 is the maximum at the moment for the competitive rules, I think. Or
It depends on the points. Like
yeah, I
for
think
every
5 for 10, 4,000 points, right?
yes, for every
Yes.
200 points.
I think I never scratched on the maximum for now, and I'm not sure if it's that necessary to go to the max, but at least I try not to get too few units on the table, like getting too much expensive stuff. For example, in our competitive format, I wouldn't like take 2 riptides. I'm sorry, not riptides. I think it's from the new DAO Union. I forgot the name, but
Totally not Tau.
totally not Tau. I think Titans. I think they're called Titans. To take like more than half the points cost. So you only have like 4 activations. That's too few because if you lose one, it's going to be tough. I mean, you're going first every turn. That's upside, but still you will have trouble to get on the missions, the objectives, and contest the objectives. That's a big problem with activation.
With contesting the objectives, go into a bit into that. We have to be careful because that's what we just before the podcast mentioned in the normal format of the game, not our specialized routes. The objectives stick to, so you keep them until nobody else goes there. In our format, you have to stay on the objective, so that needs to be thought about.
Yeah, let's talk about like the regular one-page rules
Yes.
format. So 4 rounds played, scoring once at the end of the game, and sticky objectives. Okay, I think we can agree. Like, no matter the format, in general sense, it's better to have more activations.
That's true.
But if you just achieve a lot of activations due to weak units, like weak firepower, weak defense, no amount of activations can really save you, but for specific cases. Like when you're immune to morale due to some effects and something, then you can achieve something, but in general, like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Uh,
Is there an advantage to have less activations than your opponent?
yes, there is one advantage to be.
Two advantages.
Yeah, exactly. To be, but for what comes to my mind is definitely that you will be first next, or probably be first next turn, or next round when you finish first. So have gone through all the activation, and that kind of. So I agree. A lot more activations help to kind of react on the opponent better and keep keep the key units ready when they are really needed, and not to have them move previously. But at some points, so especially when I want to hit hard through ambush units or something like that, I stick to have maybe 1 or 2 units less, just 1 or 2 activations less to hit really hard on the next turn. So that when I play human defense force, I play more reactive, more area control. When I play an area control game, I want to have as much activations as possible.
And another upside that is probably often overlooked, in my opinion, it can be an upside, it can be a downside too, but your activations matter more. Let's put it in an example. You have only one unit which costs 2,000 points, and the enemy has like 10 units with 200 points each. You activate first, you activate your 2,000 point unit, and it's probably going to delete 2 units because you can only target 2 units. But so the activation matters way more, and if it survives the round, it can delete 2 other units the next round, and you decimate your enemy more. And for example, if you have a unit with high toughness, it won't decay over time. So you're always shooting or fighting at the maximum, no matter how much hit points you have left, which decays normally in units which have more models. And if you have like 10 or 20 models, or even elite units with 6 models with toughness 3, you can shoot them and they are getting weaker.
Yeah, I see.
Activations, the more your activations matter.
Yeah, partially I would agree, but with these big, tough units you're talking about, you're paying a high tax for high toughness. So if you go for less toughness, you can bring more weapons, at
Right.
least double or 3 times the weapons. So if you go the other way, you can more effectively, more easily delete big units. So it's a trade-off.
Yes, that's what I was talking about. That this has an upside and a downside. The downside is, of course, you activate and you're done. And if you have no targets because they are hiding, or you don't manage to kill anything because it has like hunker down and stealth and cover, yeah, you can't do any much more, and the enemy can totally dominate your movement and whatever.
Yeah.
That's
So
the downside, but nevertheless, it has an upside that your activations matter more when you have less activations because your units are more expensive.
yeah,
So
it's just as a comment in between, that goes kind of in the direction of what playstyle you prefer. So having more infantry kind of units or vehicles. So as you said, you pay the cost for having vehicles with multiple wounds, which don't decay with a fixed kind of weaponry, or you have infantry kind of units where you get less and less weapons. It's very dependent on the unit, of course. If it has 1 or 2 very special weapons and the rest is just health points, or some units where everybody is armed the same way. So I think that goes into this discussion of preference vehicles over infantry or the other way around. Maybe we can also, if there's time at the end, dig deeper into that conversation, just as a suggestion,
Yeah,
if you'd
yeah.
like.
There's a middle ground actually, which is elite infantry. So they just cover like the golden middle. Do you think it's the golden middle when you go for a smaller unit of tough three uh, models? Like they bring more weapons points wise in comparison to let's say a tough 12 vehicle, but they cost less. Is it worth it to take them? What's your opinion?
Engin, you go first.
Okay, so for me, I kind of like these targets a lot because I prefer to have one of or two anti-tank or a few more anti-tank weapons with me to crack these opens. And a tank, you will know, never kill a miniature with just one shot. There are a few deadly 6 weapons maybe, but most of them are deadly 3. Just my opinion. I have to look about that. But there are a lot of these elite infantry with tough 3 and so on,
Hmm.
you can pick these apart quite good. So they are vulnerable to deadly and blast weapons because they are most of the time at 3 to 6 models. So blast 3 is effective against them as well as deadly 3. So they are quite good targets, I think. But of course, I think points wise they are in the middle in between infantry and tanks. So it should be balanced, but could be a bit vulnerable to these special weapons.
Yeah, that's exactly my point too. Let's say, for examples, the Battle Brothers Terminators,
Destroyers.
destroyers, right? And like the custodians, like all of them, or almost all of them. Yeah, deadly weapons, pretty much delete them because most deadly weapons have high armor penetration. At least 2, more 3, and some 4. So you can, with some dedicated anti-tank weapons, pretty much delete the elite infantry unit. So I wouldn't rely on them too much. Of course, having 1, 2 is a lot of fun, and they are most of the time good in melee and in ranged combat. But yeah, like Engin said, they are vulnerable to deadly weapons very much and to blast weapons to some degree.
To rending weapons because
To
they most
rending
likely have a high defense.
to to rending weapons and
But to be honest, I wouldn't be so sure about this armor topic because we play mostly high armor armies. But so thinking about like ogres or maybe some other factions like Tyranids or sorry, alien hives,
What's
um,
Tyranids? Never heard about it.
I don't know what you're
orcs and
talking
so
about.
on.
Sorry.
Orcs and so on tend to have not that high armor values. I don't know. Maybe they have even higher armor values than the average of these armies, but could be that there are options with just being tough, just by being having multiple wounds and not that much armor. So
Yeah.
I barely know any army that have worse than 4+ armor on toughness models. I think Jackals maybe have like defense 5 plus toughness 3 armors, and on Age of Fantasy some skink riders or something like this. But I think most of them have 4+ or even 3+ defense value. Most deadly weapons have at least armor penetration 2+,
yeah,
which would be yeah, like if you have 4+ toughness 3 models, you reduce to 6+, and it gets even worse. Maybe you get a bit of redundant if you have armor penetration 4+ and targeting something with defense 5+ with toughness 3. still you manage to delete one if you hit, and most of the time they will fail their armor save. I like elite infantry because you don't have to pay much miniatures.
And also they are cool a lot of
And they're
times.
cool, very cool. Yeah, I like them.
Think
Like,
about destroyers, totally not Terminators, but they are cool models.
true, and I like the Dow Union battle suits. Okay, shut up, Alexa. Dow Union Elite battle suits. Yeah, they have toughness 3+ and defense 3+. And I like them very much. I use them. I want to use them a lot.
Yeah. So
But
it's rather because they are cool, not because they are super effective.
So they are pretty much, as of talking now about the battle suits right now, and a good next topic. You ambush them in. You fire with them because they are very good on the offensive, but then they're most of the time right next to the enemy, and they can charge them or delete them with deadly weapons. It doesn't happen all the time, but it can happen pretty fast. And next topic, ambush. Or do you want to add something to the now mentioned elite infantry activate? Also the middle ground between few activations with big models and high toughness to very much activations with low post-count units. The middle ground was elite.
No, I think everything has been said. I mean, we can wrap it up like they are vulnerable. They are cool most of the time. They are the middle ground, but as with all games, it's more effective to go into one extreme. Also, to give your opponent a limited target choice. If you only field infantry,
Yeah.
all his heavy weapons are more or less wasted points. If you only field tough 6 or higher high defense models, then his weak weaponry is more or less useless. So
But
going for the middle ground also gives a lot of options to like for all weapons. It gives every weapon a purpose. So yeah, it's pretty vulnerable.
but to kind of pick up the topic Johannes just mentioned, and we were talking about also in the activations. Of course, these multi-wound kind of elite infantry units are quite limited from the space they need. So in order for to use routes like ambush and so on, that could be beneficial because there you can have a really compact unit which might be difficult to screen for the enemy to bring behind enemy lines. So from that point of view, that's a benefit for them. So that's a benefit of, I think, these elite troops, that they only need limited space to really ambush behind the enemy and bring the firepower they bring. You can also bring ambush a 5-man squad of human defense force. What's the name called? The special forces. I forgot now.
Stormtroopers?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Stormtroopers. They are also good, but they will never be as deadly as a DAO battle battlesuit unit. And if they are very compact, so from the ambush point of view, it's beneficial, I think, to use these.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe, yeah. But another wrap up I wanted to about the activation. So when I'm creating my army, I tend to if I'm realizing, oh, I have too few activations, I tend to cut down some points or change so I have more activations. And even going to the minimum cost, so like the cheapest unit with no upgrades, I tend to squeeze some of them in just to bait activations and to activate the low cost units first, while my high cost units who are behind terrain or something. So I can bait the enemy to activate something, so I have good targets to choose for my heavy hitting stuff. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
the point
this is exactly how I build my armies too. I first build it like what models do I have available, what is cool, and when I feel like oh shit, it's not enough activations, throwing out expensive stuff and putting in 2 cheap units instead, just to get this more activation. The only exception is when I building a list with ambush heavy hitters, then I want to be sure that in this round where I drop them, I can activate them before my opponent does. So I try to make sure I have not the most available activations possible, but a bit less, just to
But even though Johannes wanted to wrap up and end the topic, I'd open it up again and say
no, list building is a new topic. It's fine. It's fine.
About this, the activation management. So we looked at the list building and so on, but how do you do target picking? Because I was thinking sometimes it make sense to leave up 1 or 2 infantrymen of a troop of the enemy just to keep the activation for the enemy, to be sure that you are you will go first next round, so not completely wipe out an enemy unit. And also on the target priority, do you prefer to shoot at units that are already activated, or do you shoot at units that will be activated? Because a unit that will be activated, of course, is a potential threat for you. But an enemy unit that already had been activated means that the enemy will have to activate another unit, and so that's again this idea of being first in the next round. So if you shoot a not activated unit and is wiped out, then you will make it easier for the enemy to go first next round.
I think sorry if I want to.
No, that's the question.
That depends on if it's the last round or not, because in the last round you probably want to pin units that are holding objectives, if you or tagging objectives, so they can contest it, and you can then run onto the objective to get it. That is a valid point, but normally you would say you target a unit that hasn't been activated to reduce the amount of damage they can do against you. Obviously.
So, not I would say not always. If you know that a unit isn't gonna be a real threat for you, then just shoot the unit that's.
Yeah, of course, that is not always. That was more like a general topic. Sometimes you said about leaving like 1 or 2 models left in the unit. That can be a good tactic to increase the enemy activation, so you can go first next round. But these 1 or 2 models can be pretty annoying, like blocking passes so you can charge the enemy unit you wanted to charge, or blocking the small path to the objective, maybe, so he can run to the objective and he has to charge the unit or kill it first, the one model. That can be pretty annoying. And or if the unit has a special weapon who can dish out some damage still, or he can charge to bait the first melee activations. If you don't want to strike back, you can still annoy them. There's a lot of downsides in leaving models alive, or leaving units alive with only 1 or 2 models left.
Yeah, correct. I have to admit, so as we play Grimdark Future, like scoring every round, I only tend to play from round to round. Like just checking how many points can I get this round. So I will delete even not dangerous enemy units with 2 models just to get the point. But this isn't applicable for like the long-term play when it's just about the last round. Then you really have to play differently. So I don't know. It really depends on the situation. Definitely. And it's hard to have every option before your inner eye, like how it's going to play out.
Except for me, because I'm perfect. But
yes,
I get it that it's very hard for you.
Yeah,
Yes.
uh, I think that brings in quite some tactical depth into the game. So, to be honest, I haven't used it myself too much, but I think that's quite something to think about when playing the game. To these action management things like, will I leave a unit or a miniature of a unit almost wiped there or not? I think these are valid options to think about when playing the game. And but also an additional point Johannes just mentioned, I'd like to comment on, and Patrick, you just mentioned that I think after our last game we did something quite wrong, or often quite wrong in our game, that you really have to keep 1 inch of space in between every unit, so even in between allied units,
Yeah,
and we
even your
often
own.
miss. Yeah, and we missed that. So
Yeah.
that goes into the point Johannes said. So that's something to always keep in mind, and we always forgot. So this area control is quite significant, and even but you could also turn it around. Now thinking about that, you could leave a single or two miniatures of the enemy just to stay in the way of his own units. So if you
Hmm.
kill a
Meat
unit,
shield unit. Yeah.
exactly, not completely, but just kill 1 or 2 models, and they get pinned, then that's kind of shitty for the enemy, because he
Hmm.
can only unpin them, and he can't maybe drive around them with these more expensive units because of this 1 inch rule. You
Yes.
also have to keep, so that there's some quite tactical options to think
Or
about.
even next level tactics, like you leave the useless two models unit alive, so he has to activate them first to move out of the way, so then you
Exactly.
can activate
Yeah.
again and do something before he can't even bring his heavy hitter unit in place because the
Yeah.
two
This will more
leftovers were in
often.
the way.
Sorry, I want. This will more often come up than the unit are pinned because
Oh, you
yeah,
don't play human defense force, do you?
no, that's not what I meant. But if there's something alive with like 1 or 2 models left, it wasn't on purpose that you left them alive. It's more like so you can shoot them with low firepower to maybe pin them and kill one model and then pin them. But often the case you either overkill them or
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
they only pin.
Yeah, I know you can't do that much.
It's
You're
just
Then
the
not
of
able to.
situational thing. Even if you don't wipe them, which was your original intent, you leave
yeah,
that. You take advantage of the situation and make the best out of it.
right,
So
yes,
Exactly.
that,
And but you could also kind of, even if it's 4 models, and that's something more to think about, arrange to leave the enemy something like 2 to 4 models. I think you can plan for. So that's, I
that
think it.
yeah, okay,
but
that you can
also
plan for.
think
So yeah,
about like
Yeah,
go.
you shoot at a unit and it survives. It isn't pinned. It just has two models left. But the enemy is the one who decides which model gets removed. So most likely the two heavy weapons are still inside. So it's even more to think about. Do I go all in and kill them because there is a laser cannon, there's something still heavy inside?
Most of the time this will happen. Especially on the armies we play, which have like 1 or 2 special weapons or heavy weapons in the squad, and the rest do have uh, like bad weapons. Yeah, the enemy will always leave the special, or most of the time leaves the special and heavy weapons alive, except for when he's blocking himself.
yeah,
From the
exactly.
past.
That's the point. So what if you have 1 or 2 laser cannons, or 1 laser cannon and 2 kind of heavy rifle weapons there? Okay, then do you think about wiping them out in the next step before they are activated, or it's, I think it's worth the point to think about, just leave it. Maybe, yeah, that 1 laser cannon might be not the difference maker, but not having his whole army behind that, kind of being stuck as an
Yeah, well, what
extreme.
map? Yeah,
Yeah.
strange map if you have your whole
Or
army stuck behind one model.
To be honest, I think in our maps we played, it can be quite sticky. And we
Yes.
never thought about this 1-inch rule. And to be honest, if I think back, there had been a lot of situation where you wouldn't be able to move at all, where
Yeah,
one
we
troop
had it several times. This is true.
blocked at least 2 to 3 units behind that.
But to be honest, if there is a heavy weapon or two heavy weapons or three, one heavy weapon, two special weapons, I would wipe them. And if it's just a unit to bring bodies to the field, like the human defense force does sometimes, just conscripts with no special weapons, just to block, just to have area control, then I would leave them. So for me at least, it always depends on what weapons are still there.
Definitely. All I wanted to say is that's worth a point thinking about when really, it's an additional tactical aspect to think about during the game, and I will try to keep it in mind when we next time play that.
Yeah, leave my laser cannons alive. This is
I will do so.
Well,
this is what we should take.
I think for example, Prime Brothers, they often don't have that problem because they are the whole unit is weaponized the same. Like you have special units with weapons and not like a unit of bolters or the equivalent from OPR.
Heavy rifle.
And one heavy.
What's a bolter?
Yeah. Sorry, I made that up. So let's maybe talk about ambush again.
Yes.
We didn't pick up on that topic.
Yes.
Or do you want to add something to?
No, we're already like deep into next level play shit. We're far outside of the general activation topic. So let's move over to ambush again.
So at least for me, when I'm creating my army, I like to have it's obvious, but having an ambush is an upside, especially if you have a specialized ambusher who can ambush next to an enemy tank and delete it. Or most of the time, it's pretty much on having deadly weapons behind enemy lines to hit tanks or elite units. I think it's barely that you want to have mass destruction weapons to destroy 20 orcs, for example, or 10.
So, yeah.
And this you have to consider when building your army about the activation. So when you start with 2 activations and 4 ambushers, it's pretty much you going first, but you are the enemy can control the game. You have to activate 2, and then he can do whatever he wants with his units without fear of getting destroyed or getting his pass blocked.
Yeah. So this is the question of how many ambushes you want to take. For me personally, I would never take more than I'm absolutely sure that I can activate them after ambushing and before my opponent activates his first unit. And you're limited to turn 2 and turn 3 because when they enter at turn 4, they are not able to claim objectives. So I think I never go for more than 2 ambush units.
Similar story for me, but again, sorry that I go that much into that direction. When I kind of got the experience with the human defense force that they are quite shooty, so strong also on distance, and especially maybe when you play against a melee focused army, you don't only have to think about them as an alpha strike units, because when you kind of on a ranged already killed 1 or 2 units of the enemy, then it's very difficult for the ambushers to strike first. So I'd like to often get more than 1 ambush unit. I prefer to have 2 kind of to how it's said, to have too much targets for the enemy. With 1 activation, he won't probably wipe 2 of the units, just in case I can't be sure that I activate both of them. Also, the human defense force ambushers are relatively cheap, I would say.
Yeah.
So you can have two, and so under the aspect that it can happen that I'm not activating first on my ambush turn, I'd like to have two, but that's kind of the story again with this army. I prefer to have two or kind of none, because there's also the aspect, I often used ambushes and they were quite dead fast. So I go either the way of heavy area control or
Hmm.
several ambushes to place in at the
Hmm.
enemy. I don't say it the right way, but this was kind of my
Yeah.
experience.
It depends on the army list.
Yeah.
So you can, yeah, there's different tactics.
That was
How?
what I was. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Just wanted to ask you how you are planning to use your ambushes.
That was when I was talking about the battle suits, for example, they were like a fire and forget unit. That's not the case in that much in battle suits, because they are quite tanky and they have a lot of firepower, so they can delete the target they want to. And but if you fail to delete it, then they would be dead. But having too much ambushers, I noticed that playing against Engin's Humans Defense Force, he screens pretty good. So you, if you spread your units out, you won't have that much space to ambush your stuff in where you
Hmm.
want it to. That's a point to keep in mind. And I like with the battle suits, I wanted to ambush them behind his tanks, but he screened, so I couldn't reach them.
Hmm.
And if you have too much ambushers, you are lacking firepower, or maybe even melee power in the first turn. And
Hmm.
if you ambush them later in like third turn, yeah, you're lacking for the first and second turn firepower and maybe melee combat power, so you aren't deleting much of the enemy, which
Hmm.
And
could be troublesome in the final round where you score.
and as we said before, you're missing these activations in these rounds.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, which right is could be an upside in the case, like Patrick said, you're going first for the case.
but your other
Although
units could be baited. That's the
yes,
problem.
the other units could be baited. It could be, of course, an upside if you have only ambushers like the demons. So you can ambush your whole army, but yeah, you're lacking damage in the first turn then.
Hmm.
And
If you're ambushing everything, I would say you're definitely lacking damage, because you can't ambush on the first turn unless you're
uh,
playing Dark Brothers, and that's something I'm painting up also. That because there also ambush gets very interesting when you can ambush already in the first turn.
I wanted to point out that there's different use cases for ambush. So you can use ambush with pretty much every army as like a counter or drop into the backfield of the enemy. But it's also a possibility for melee armies. So what I encountered that when I play a melee army or when I played around with Army Forge, just putting units together, checking if it would work out. It's actually more expensive for melee armies to put them all in transports to move
Right.
than just to ambush. So you're saving on transports, so you can use more units, and it's not about dropping into the backfield of the enemy, but just in 9-inch range so you can charge. So it's a pretty safe option to deliver them, and you're saving the cost for the transport. It's not your
And
main goal to drop them super clever in the unshielded deployment zone of the enemy. You just want to get into melee. So it's a viable option just to drop in front of the army and charge in, instead of paying for transport, having the risk of the
yeah,
transport exploding and everyone getting pinned, and having the how is it called, deadly terrain, roll.
Yeah.
This is shitty and costly and everything. So yeah, it's a cheaper and viable option to get your melee army in front of the enemy rather
Right.
than
Oh.
walking 24 inches. You just drop them.
Although you have to keep in mind, like you said, that you have the first activation, because if the enemy has the first activation, you drop your melees in front of him, or you have to make sure that you have 2 units you can charge, because
Yes.
otherwise you can just move away.
Yes. Yeah, but if you're walking, the enemy has 2 or more rounds to shoot them before they reach melee. And if you drop them, they just have 1 activation to shoot before they
Yes,
enter melee if they
a
survive.
melee unit without a deliver system, like a transport ambush or just being fast, is not viable that much. There may be some cases, and especially depends on if you score last round or every round. But having a unit just walk up the whole field, a melee unit is not pretty viable, I think.
No,
So
I'm talking about transport. Walking was just the wrong word. Even if
yeah,
you're driving up with a
okay.
transport, it's very risky to lose them midfield.
Yeah, that depends on the transport actually, because there are some transports who have toughness 12, and that's pretty hard to delete it
Yeah,
in
but
1
they
or
are
2
so
activations.
expensive.
They are
So
They're
super
expensive.
expensive. You can't do it with 3 units, 3 transports. It's not viable. But you
No,
can easily ambush 3, 4, 5 units.
yeah, but that depends on what you are transporting. Like, for example, I don't know about the Land Raider equivalent.
heavy, heavy tank.
Yeah, the heavy tank. But since I was looking at the Zaurian Starhost, for example, they have a transport with toughness 12, and that's about it. He doesn't have any weapons, so he's pretty cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And you can deploy elite, like several units in him. You can deploy 2 units with 5 hit points and a hero attached, for example. So you don't need 2 of those to deploy 2 melee units. And the transports themselves have still use after you left them to
Yeah.
charge. Or
Just
you
not the
can,
biggest offensive use, but you're talking
yeah,
about claiming objectives or like blocking path and
true,
everything.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's
But
the upside of transports, and there are some transports who have a lot of firepower still left.
it's a bit how you like to play your army. So you could have 1 transport and 1 melee unit, kind of, or you take 2 melee units. Both have their benefits, I would say. And so if you say the transport can claim an objective, the second melee unit can also claim an objective. It's about how a bit you the enemy is positioned and how you would like to play your style. Both is valid, and so but
Yeah, but we're talking about deliver mechanic, so you
Yeah.
can use it. You can like rush with your transport and then charge for 6 inches, which leaves them 18 inches of charge range.
But you're
Uh,
away 24 inches at least.
yeah, except for if when the enemy moved up first.
Yeah.
And okay, so you can do a 1-turn charge, but you can't do that with ambush either, except for Dark Brothers.
I wanted
Exactly.
I was just waiting for that.
Yes, but so and in the second, yeah, of course, you can lose your transport with a deadly with a toughness 6 transport. It's
Yeah,
that's
they are
pretty
too risky for
dangerous.
me.
Yeah, they are pretty risky, except when you can hide them pretty good, which
And
is
as it's
not
a
always
model
the case.
agnostic system, just use a 1 by 1 inch square
Yeah,
block as the transport, and you're safe.
that's
Okay,
a bit
well,
uncool.
you could do that,
Yeah.
but I think I wouldn't play you then. No, but yeah, you can hide your transport, or at least you have to hide them to not get pinned then, uh, if you lose the transport. Yeah. I don't know what I was talking about, but I think I was finished.
About your
Like
penis,
having
I
one
think.
ambush and one transported unit.
We didn't know either. It's just
I stopped
stuff.
listening
Okay.
20 minutes ago, so
Yeah. Sorry about the ramble.
No, but I think
Um,
it's valid to use ambush for melee units to it. I think it's
yeah, of course, it's
yeah.
valid.
Yeah, but another aspect I'd like to use is just not as a killer unit. Keep them as cheap as possible in the backfield for objectives or disturb the enemy. Just
just
Yeah,
drawing
you can
attention away. It's a viable
yeah,
use too. Yeah.
you can bait melee activations, or you can decimate him when he isn't good in melee. That's true.
Okay. So, what do you think? That's it for today.
But
We covered
I think
everything.
I think it's both topics go, of course, quite deep further. Also there, but I think we gave yeah for now. I think we are good.
Yeah.
yeah, we looked into
Nothing
it.
specific.
We could look more into it, especially on specific armies.
Yeah,
But that's for another podcast, not for today.
Yeah. Maybe because we slightly entered the topic of melee, and there's a lot of shenanigans you can do with melee.
yeah,
Maybe we can pick it as a topic for one of the next
of
podcast
course.
episodes.
Yeah, and just maybe in aligned with that, there are also, of course, these ambush units who can deploy closer than 9 inches. We didn't
Yeah,
look at
we
that too.
didn't cover that at all. Yeah, true.
Yeah, they are not much, I think, but there are some, or they need like a beacon to undergo the minimum distance to ambush.
Yeah. Also, there's abilities that
Block.
prevent
Yeah,
from ambushing closer than 18 inches, I think.
yeah. That's why I
Yeah,
like to bring a Inquisitor just to have that
That
18-inch
18
bubble
inch bubble, exactly.
for 80 points.
although I haven't played against an Inquisitor from you. Maybe
I
you played
always
against
bring that.
Patrick, but I haven't played against one.
I always had a second army list with one. Never used it probably.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, so
Yeah, that's it for today's episode. As always, we are happy about reading your comments, so please post a lot. Maybe even suggestions for next episode's topics and or armies we could cover or rules we could cover or cover we could cover.
Yeah, there will be some changes as you mentioned on that one.
Yeah, I hope so.
don't forget to like and subscribe.
And
Hit
leave
the
a
bell
comment.
for notification.
Leave a
But
comment, maybe.
And if
Yeah.
you're an energy drink company, please comment us if you'd like to sponsor.
Yeah, write us an
Yeah.
email at dps@dicepersecond.de. So we're happy to have a sponsor, but only if it's energy drinks. Everything else we're not interested in.
No, cars.
Booster.
Yeah,
Today's
we
sponsor.
shied away. Google and Microsoft asked us to, but
Yeah, not
they
interested.
don't produce energy drinks, so
No. Exactly. Okay.
Okay.
yeah.
See you next time.
See you next time.
Listen
Bye bye.
to you next time.
Ciao.
Tschö.